Go over to St. John 10:10.
The thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly.
All right, now read that 9th verse for me, please.
I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture.
Listen to what Jesus Christ said. These are the words of Jesus Christ. This is the offer that's being made. He's saying, I am the door. But what is he the door to? Look at what he's saying is on the other side of him. Someone comes to him. Look at what he said you will find. So he's talking about the quality of life. When he says you will find pasture, he's talking about the quality of life. If a person owned cattle, farm animals, would it be very important for that person that owned farm animals to have pasture? And if so, why would it be important for that person that has farm animals to have pasture?
Because that's where the animals live at and eat.
That's where they live and that's where they eat. So it's important to find pasture. So the analogy here is associated with that of agriculture. And what Jesus is saying, if you come in, you will find what you seek and what you need to survive. You will find pasture. You will find what you desire. But he's saying, I'm the door. I am the protector. I am the front door. And so if you come to me, then once you come to me, God got you. So he's offering and helping people to understand that through him, through his teachings, if you accept his teachings, you accept his practice, you accept his words and live by them, then you will find an improved quality of life. What kind of quality of life? In the 10th verse, he goes on to talk about that quality of life, that pasture. He's saying, not only will you have life, but you're going to have it abundantly. You will not only have that pasture, but you will have an abundance of pasture. So the same is true for us. Not only will we have life, but we'll have an abundance of life. The only way we can have an abundance of life is for us to expect that we will have life more than what we had before. We have to expect that life better. There's a life better than being just a slave. The Hebrew children had to expect that life could be better. We have to expect the people who were in slavery, our ancestors in slavery in this country, had to expect that life could be better than just being a slave in this country. You have to expect that there is a life beyond where you are. But if that guardrail of failure, that you've been conditioned to believe, that limits you, if you don't see yourself being able to be beyond that, then that guardrail, that limitation, is going to be the thing that prevents you from walking in this abundance. You have to expect, because you know Jesus Christ, because you are trusting in the Lord through the teachings of Jesus Christ, the Lord said, all I need you to do is to expect that I am going to do something greater than what you have, and I will. Jesus came to the earth so that the Lord's people's path in life would become better, if they would choose to listen to his words. And why is that important? Because when we're born into this world, no matter what century a person was born in, they were born into a system. They were born into a system that put guardrails on what they could and could not do. In Egypt, it was unthinkable that a Hebrew child would ever get anywhere near the seat of being Pharaoh. But did it happen? Does history record that it happened? Someone who was not Egyptian almost became Pharaoh. Does history record that it happened?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Moses almost became Pharaoh. Understand the way that the rules of society, the guardrails that were put in place so that only Egyptians could do so. Just like guardrails were put in place that only those who were Caucasian, male, could rise to the highest role in this country. Guardrails were put in place that made the journey to being able to do so, if you were not male and Caucasian, to rise to that was made or put in place to make it more difficult. What I'm trying to get you to see is that all of that's a lie. That is not God's way. The same word says, if you are trusting in the instructions of the Lord, it says promotion. In Psalms, the Bible declares, Psalm 75, neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but God is the judge. He putteth down one, and he sets up another. God has the ability to cause his children to rise the way that he wants them to rise. Not only did the rules of society during Moses' time set it in such a way that the Lord caused it in such a way for Moses to almost rise and to become Pharaoh, but there was also another Hebrew in the same Egyptian lineage who almost became Pharaoh, who was actually next in line to Pharaoh. And that person's name was Joseph. But the rules of that society, the rhythm of the society of Egypt, was set up so that the man-made rules for survival was set up so that the leadership would continue to be in the hands of Egyptians, not non-Egyptians. Yet Joseph, because of what God did a new thing and caused Joseph to be the one who almost became Pharaoh and who had the power like Pharaoh in order to get them through the most difficult period that they could that history records in Egyptian history. It wasn't Pharaoh that got them through those 7 years of plenty and those 7 years of famine. It was Joseph who did that. He led Egypt, a non-Egyptian, an Hebrew. What I'm trying to get you to see, God did a new thing. It wasn't Egypt's wish that Joseph did that. God did that. It wasn't in this country, it wasn't the wish of the people who wrote rules in this country that we would have an African American male who was going to be the president. It was God who enabled that to happen, doing a new thing. And the fact that we have more and more rights for women, being more comparative, coming in closer from a comparison perspective, being more aligned with that of men. It's a new thing that's being done. But it's not being done willingly on behalf of many men in this society, specifically white Anglo-Saxon men who are in control of much of the wealth. What I'm trying to get you to understand is that these guardrails are not real. They're there for survival. They're there for greed, purposes of greed. And when we adhere to them, when we believe that they set limits for us that we can't go past, then what you do is limit your ability to be able to be what God can call you to be. Go to St. Matthew 16. Let me have a reader at verse 5.
And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. And Jesus said unto them, Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, It is because we have taken no bread. When Jesus perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason ye among yourselves, because ye have brought no bread? Do ye ye not yet understand whether remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000, and how many baskets ye took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000, and how many baskets ye took up?
Listen to what Jesus is saying. This conversation between Jesus and the disciples. Jesus is talking about the guardrails by which the disciples are living or surviving and relying on and trusting in is what he's focusing on here. In the 5th verse, Jesus said his disciples were come to the other side, but they had forgotten to get bread. And this conversation about bread and whether or not they remembered to get bread, less about the bread, and it's more about Jesus reminding them that God did something. He did a new thing in order to feed 4,000 people at a different time. He did a new thing. That's what he's trying to get them to recognize, to emphasize it had not been done before. So to show them that he is God, through Jesus Christ, he did a new thing. But what Jesus is talking about is they are giving respect to the leaven of mankind. So what is he trying to say? Here, leaven represents man-made traditions and false teachings. Specifically, false teachings that were handed down by the Pharisees about what was possible. And so these teachings that ended up being society rules, people began to live by them. They began to order their life by these limitations, by this leaven. And remember, we learned that when leaven, according to Webster, means what? What does leaven mean?
To introduce one.
Bread.
To introduce one thing.
To introduce one thing into another as to affect it throughout.
To introduce one thing into another as to affect it throughout. What Jesus is talking about is man-made traditions and false teachings of the Pharisees has been introduced into the society, and now it is being reflected in the lives of the disciples, because the disciples only believe that the only way that they can get more food is for them to bring food. So Jesus is trying to remind them, he's saying, do you not remember that I did a new thing and we fed 5,000? And you remember the baskets of food that were left over that you took up? Do you remember when I did another new thing and we fed 4,000 and the baskets of food that you took up that was left over? Did you forget that? So why are you worrying about whether or not you forgot bread? He's letting them know that they are worrying because they are thinking about it through the lens of what mankind has set up, the leaven that they've been taught to live by. He's trying to get them to learn to look to God to do a new thing. To not just do it one time, but to keep doing what? New things. Like then, today our exposure to man-made traditions and false teachings can cause us to limit our expectations. Just like the disciples were limiting their expectations, it can cause these man-made traditions today can cause us to limit our expectations if we're not careful of what, limitations of what? Of what is possible by God and through the name of Jesus Christ. If we're not careful, because we've only ever known the traditions of what we've been taught to be possible. But it wasn't until we got a president that was not a white Anglo-Saxon male that the people in a country with multiple races began to believe that it is possible to to get someone else other than a white Anglo-Saxon male to be the leader of this country. And the more that we begin to people other than white Anglo-Saxon males at the head of CEOs of these different major corporations this day and time, the more that we're able to see that there are other people other than white Anglo-Saxon males, the more people begin to believe that it's possible for them to be that. That's what Jesus is commenting about. He's commenting about the leaven that's been injected into society, that's ingrained in their minds to only think of by default of the limitation of what you can't do. And what he's trying to do is to remind the disciples here that if you think that the Lord did this, I asked him and he did it twice, don't you think that the Lord would do it again or as many times as I would ask him? So he's trying to get the disciples to recognize that they have to let go, they have to think a new way and not rely on the leaven of man-made traditions and false teachings. Not to limit what God can do based off of what mankind says. Not to limit our expectations of what is possible by God through Jesus Christ. I want to show you this in verse 2. Look at what in verse 2 Jesus gives examples of what leaven or expectations that are limiting the way of thinking about what's possible or belief. He gives the examples of this in verse 2. Someone read verse 2.
He answered and said unto them, When it is evening, ye say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red.
Okay, he's talking about when it's evening, you believe it's going to be what kind of weather? When the sky is red, it's going to be what kind of weather? Fair weather. He's pointing out this is what you believe in society. Well, where did you get that belief? Continue reading.
In the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. For ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky, but can ye not discern the signs of the times?
So he's saying you use these standards and you believe in these standards, this knowledge, and you have faith in this knowledge that if these conditions happen, then this will happen. And you got that knowledge from one another. You were injected with that knowledge. You ingested that knowledge when you were born into this world, into this community. And this is the way people in this community think. You believe that this is the only possible outcome. You believe in this outcome. Let me give you an example today. On the news, they say it's going to rain. Before even seeing the rain on that day in your neighborhood, people will say what? It's going to rain. They don't even see the rain. But they will declare in their neighborhood that it's going to what? Rain. Why? Because we've been conditioned to believe in the leaven or what's been injected into our knowledge base as being the reality. When Jesus is saying it's not true. Just because someone says it's going to rain, it doesn't mean that it's going to rain where? Where are you at? Yeah, it could rain 50 miles away or 25 miles away, but it doesn't mean it's going to rain where you are. And this is what Jesus he's calling out. He's calling out the fact that you can automatically, because you're being told that this is a condition. So when this condition happens, you can believe that this other condition is going to occur. That's what leaven is. But what he's saying, you can believe that, but you can't believe that the Lord bread. He can't provide food. But you can believe what mankind says more than you can believe the Lord. So what he's trying to get them to recognize is that they can believe what mankind says, but they won't believe that the Lord will do a new thing. Yet the Lord has already showed them twice that he would.
Oh, praise be to God, from whom all blessings flow. It is our prayer at Clay Family Ministries that your life has been increased with the increase of God through this study. We appreciate and are thankful for your fellowship during this life skills study segment.